Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Silverberg. I'm chair of the Open Space Committee. I'd like to introduce Jen Miller, who is our conservation director. Jenny Gingras is our director of planning. Tony Sabelli is from Sudbury Valley Trustees, the I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Sorry, Conservation Land Trust.
We just call him Tony. Andy Koenigsberg is chair of Concom, but also on the Open Space Committee with me, and we have several members of the Ellis-Walker family here who are the landowners, and we're here to do a presentation and an information session on property on Bowman Street that we refer to as the Ellis-Walker property, 34 acres of open space that we're proposing that town acquire. I'd like to do, Jen Miller has a presentation on this, then we'll do a question and answer session. It's not a official meeting, it's an information session, so you don't necessarily have to introduce yourself, but I would ask that I'll acknowledge you and then you can ask your question, okay? Try and run it a little bit like a meeting. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Jen and shut up.
Thank you, Mark. Let me know if I'm not being loud enough for you to hear me well in the back. Sometimes my voice gets quiet over time, so just let me know if I'm not projecting enough. So as Mark said, my name is Jennifer. I'm the conservation director for the town. This is the first proposed acquisition that I'll have been here for. Very excited. It's a great property, and want to start off with telling you a little bit more about kind of where it's located, give you a sense of place, and then I kept it really short and sweet. We've got about 3 slides just to give us a little bit of reference. We'll go over kind of the financial aspect of it, and then we really just want to have time for folks to ask questions. As Mark mentioned, this is on the town meeting warrant article, which is closing over at Great Hall tonight with the Board of Selectmen. So we want to make sure we're answering questions in advance of that and providing some context as well. So in terms of where the property is, you can see I-90 right here. Kind of cuts through a lot of open space that the town has on both sides. Over here is the Bowman property with the Sandra Pond Reservoir, and we have Bowman West, and then we have what's known as the Upton Road Conservation Area. In red right here is the proposed acquisition. We're calling it the Ellis-Walker Property. And then you can see Bowman Street cuts through right through this area here. Sorry, can't see it really well. So while there's not a direct connection to some of our open space areas, it is situated very close, and our hope is that over time we can have some trail connections with a little bit of street access to tie all of these parcels together. The town-owned properties have trails established on them already, and the acquisition has some footpaths and cart paths that exist that would be used as trails, and we would propose adding some new trails as well over time. So in terms of what the property has to offer, it's about 34 acres, as Mark mentioned. There are woodlands, open meadows, so there's some pasture land on the property that are more of an open meadow now. Lots of wetlands, so if you look on this map here, this shows different types of wetland resource areas. So there's some streams that meander through the property, kind of 3 different branches that all come together and then feed into eventually the Sandra Pond Reservoir. So it does have a direct connection to our drinking water supply, or one of our supplies for town, which is a very important aspect of acquiring this property. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there are some existing footpaths and cart paths that will serve as initial trails. So, why is it important? I touched on a little bit water supply, which to me is one of the most important reasons for acquiring this from a residential perspective. It definitely will help protect the water supply here in Westborough. It also has historic value. As part of our grant submittal process, we had to submit what's called a PNF form to the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and they definitely they came back with their evaluation that this property was of historical significance, not just in terms of its agricultural use, but also in terms of Native American occupation in the past. Obviously, with wetlands and rivers nearby, it has good purpose for the Native American occupation. It also offers climate resiliency, and we obviously hope to have passive recreation here with trail system, potential for future community gardens, and also environmental education. Not all of that is going to be implemented right away. Initially, we would look to have community access through the footpaths and cart paths as trail system. And then over time, as opportunities arise, to add in other components, such as the community gardens. Okay, so one of the important pieces that I'm sure as residents you have questions about is, okay, this sounds, hopefully this sounds great and sounds like a property that you're interested in acquiring, but you know, where's the money gonna come from? So this has been a exciting process for all of us that have been involved in it, and it's happened relatively quickly. In the last couple of months, there was a grant opportunity through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Whoops, sorry. Noted over here is LWCF. It's a reimbursement grant program, and the way it works is if you are selected through their application process, they will reimburse 50% of the cost of acquisition. So the total acquisition price is evaluated or appraised at $615,000. And so if we're selected, which we hope there's a pretty good probability for, they would contribute $307,500. It's a reimbursement program, so initially the money would come from free cash and then it would be reimbursed. And then Sudbury Valley Trustees has committed $200,000 towards the conservation restriction. A conservation restriction is required under Massachusetts general law for all open space properties. So the town can't hold its own conservation restriction, and Sudbury Valley Trustees is looking to partner with us to help us conserve this property and would hold that conservation restriction. And then the other remaining balance to make up the $615,000 would come through the Walk-Up Robinson Trust of $107,500, and then $25,000. They've also committed $25,000 in initial stewardship costs, so a total of $132,500 from Walk-Up Robinson Trust. In terms of the free cash aspect, we've worded the warrant article such that the funds would only be expended if we are selected for the grant. So if we're not selected for the grant, then it's not like we're going to have already spent the free cash up front. We would wait till we have notification that the town has been selected, and as we're getting those documents in place, we would be able to move forward and get reimbursed through the Land and Water Conservation Grant. Do you want to add anything to that, Tony or Mark, or do you feel like?
Well, I have a bunch of more to say, but I'll
well, in terms of the financial aspect.
Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Walk-Up Robinson Trust, about early '80s, the Walk-Up Robinson family owned a farm up where West Park Drive is, basically. Somebody died and left the town some money, and that's grown to a fairly large amount. There's about 1.7 million in there right now, and we're proposing to only use 132,500. The caveat on that bequest was that it be used for open space and recreation. So we can't use it for anything else but this. So it's not like we can turn around and use it to renovate the library or something like that.
And then just to also speak to what do we mean by initial stewardship? I know that's a question that's come up a few times. Initial stewardship to me is once the land is conveyed to the town, there are certain things that we need to have in place in order to open it to the public. Typically those are putting out some sort of sign to mark the area, call it monumentation sign, blazing the trails, so making sure that we have color coding on the trails, a trail map to go along with it, and a kiosk. And then also the trails are going to need, although they exist there today, in order for them to be what we feel are safe trails for the public to use, especially at stream crossings and those sort of things, we would put in some rudimentary block bridging and those sort of things. So we need to establish a small parking area that would fit a few cars. So all of those things is what we would include as part of our initial stewardship.
Okay, before we go to questions, I just want to say thank you to Jen Miller for all her hard work on this. We've been at this for over a year, but the grant was extremely time-consuming process that she stepped up on, and Jenny helped with as well. I want to thank Sudbury Valley and Tony for all their help, and particularly for their money. No, it's really, it's amazing to partner with them, and I'm hoping we can do more partnerships in the future. I especially want to thank the Walkup Robinson Trust Committee for supporting us on this. Thank the town for supporting us on this, I hope, but I really want to thank the Ellis-Walker family. It's, like I said, it was over a year ago we started this. They've been very patient. A lot of time, a lot of meetings with me, listen to me gab. And I just want to, if you could back up one slide.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
So this farm was cut off from a little, go back one slide.
Oh, this is.
Oh, no, forward one slide, okay. So the turnpike cut off a little triangle lot here. The Ellis-Walker family has agreed to give that to the town. That'll complete Bowman West. I think it just is an indication of, the generosity of the family. And I know we're buying this land, but we've really been lucky to have their commitment on this. So thank you. And with that, if there's any questions, anyone else with comments?
I forgot to point out one other thing, and I know we'll be remiss if we don't bring it up. So initially when we started this process, we were working with the state through DCR pretty closely. They are still looking at and may acquire some additional property over here that is related to the Ellis-Walker family. So DCR continues to work with them on negotiating that, and if so, it would give this proposed parcel that we're talking about tonight obviously a direct connection to that piece, but also into Upton State Forest, which is a pretty important aspect too.
Yeah, so there's another 45 acres separately owned by, that is in Upton, so Westborough won't be buying that, but hopefully that will be protected at some point. And I've walked the trails. You can walk all the way down to Upton State Forest, and it's a really tremendous opportunity for the town. So I think you can tell I'm excited. So anyway, enough of that. Any questions? Andy?
Yes, so Sudbury Valley Trustees is going to hold a conservation restriction when the land is, if hopefully the land is purchased by the town, is it going to be deeded to the Board of Selectmen? Is it going to be deeded to Concom? How's that going to work?
So the Conservation Commission.
It is going to be conservation.
Yeah.
So it'll become Chapter 97 land.
Yeah.
Okay.
John?
So I'm John McGrath. I live 2 houses down from the Walkers, so this abuts the back of my yard. And for 25 years, the Walkers and Ellises, you could not ask for better neighbors. I'm both surprised and not surprised that they're here, given the timing of things. And I'm just, as someone who this will affect directly, because it abuts me, I'm very happy with the way that this hopefully looks like this is going to go. But I just have a couple of questions, and you might not even know the answers yet, because I know we're early in the process. Reading over some of the plans in terms of parking and possible bathrooms, where would that be? How many cars are we thinking? Because it's a very windy, hilly part of the road. And just in the last few years, based on changes in the weather, the back of my yard has gotten a lot wetter than it used to be. Are there any plans that would affect the water flow that might even worsen that? And if we don't know the answers to those, that's fine, but what's the plan to start getting the answers?
Yeah, well, we're not doing any significant construction there in the foreseeable future. When I say construction, there's an existing garage on the property.
Yeah.
There's a concept that we might try and use that for conservation workshops somewhere down the road, but we've agreed to allow the family to continue to use that garage until the abutting owner no longer needs it. So that hopefully will be a long time. So,
What about parking if it's going to be used?
we're looking at like 4 to 6 spaces. It will probably be like a gravel lot that you can pull in and just go on.
And probably close to the, close to the street, close to the barn most likely?
Yeah, so it'd
it'll
be up
to the
here.
right of the barn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Starting though, you said was 3.
Oh, I'm not sure how many it'll fit
Yeah,
there.
'cause when you were both there, you said we'd start with 3.
Yep, so the parking impacts here initially will be pretty small because we don't have a big footprint, nor are we asking for a lot of initial stewardship money to create a bigger parking area and do any type of grading or anything like that. So what we're proposing here initially is a small parking footprint. We want to kind of see how things play out with the possible acquisition on the abutting parcel and whether it gets a connection into Upton State Forest. Obviously, they have the opportunity for more parking there and amenities. So if that does end up working out, then I think there becomes less of a need for parking at our point of access. And as I said, we're hoping that over time we can provide some street connections and additional trail connections to our existing open space areas. So for example, as many of you probably know, Bowman has a fairly good sized parking area currently. And so, that's fairly close. If we can have some improvements or some connections that would allow people to travel between those 2 areas fairly easily, that also would lend for some additional parking. We really need to kind of, I guess part of how I look at it and my role is looking at the greater trail system. Where can we provide some good points of access where it has the least amount of impact to abutters, but also the biggest increase in access for our hikers, walkers,
Yeah.
wildlife viewers.
That's an important point. If that Upton property goes away, I hope, I think most people will park down
Yeah,
there.
that makes sense.
Unless there's a fee, I guess, if the state charges a fee, then maybe some people will want to save money, but for the most part, I wouldn't see that we'd ever need to enlarge this lot if that goes forward. And even if we do, we'd come back. We'd either get another grant and even then we'd have to go to the town too.
Yeah, my only concern is I want to keep an eye on it, and I'll be there, so I'll keep an eye on it. Good, because if anyone parked on the street there, that would it would just be safe.
Yeah,
We can ask DPW or the select board if we can post it, no parking. If that's a helpful thing.
Like
I
if
don't
it
think
becomes
we
a
have-
problem.
Right.
I don't think we have control
I'm not
over
staying
that,
up. I'm
but-
not staying up worried about that. So.
Yeah, I think it'd be foolish to park on the street there, but,
Well, you'd be surprised.
well, unless you're throwing a big party, John.
To answer your questions about the stormwater aspect, so one of the important reasons to acquire this property is because it does allow for increased climate resiliency and carbon sequestration as well. Because a good amount of the property is forested, it helps with the carbon aspect. And with all the wetlands, that obviously helps attenuate storm impacts. So, I mean, to your point, it becomes all that more important to preserve this area. So you can imagine developing it would only probably, you know, despite the best of intentions, have increased impacts over time, right? As you add impervious surface. So to kind of come back to your last question, I think, if we were to do any additional development at the front of the site, towards the barn area, part of the stormwater regulations that we make everyone else adhere to, and certainly we would hold ourselves accountable to, is under Massachusetts state law, you can't increase stormwater flows to another property from how it was pre-development.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to be clear, anything like that is really far gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you and I might not even be here.
Hi, I'm Paul McGraw, and I also live on Bowman Street, but I live on the north side. This is on the south side of the pike. And if you ever listen to the weather report, it snows on the north side and rains on the south side. But don't believe them. That's not true. But anyway, I live up there, love the trails, walk the trails, love the open space. This is great. I can't think of anything better. But if the town were to vote it down, for whatever reason, could somebody put a road or a cul-de-sac, could houses go in there?
So the appraiser looked at that. Given the wetlands and the frontage and everything else, yeah, you could develop it with a cul-de-sac. It would be pretty expensive. So the cul-de-sac would be at the, I think the max is 800 feet. So you could probably get, you'd have to get pretty creative. But I've seen developers get creative in this town before. So I would be afraid of 8 to 10 houses. If this were combined with the abutting property in Upton, that's where it would become, you would then be able to put a through road in with frontage, and we would see probably something similar to what is going on at the end of Harvest Way, with 14 houses in Westborough and another 80 in Grafton. I don't know if it'd be quite that large, but that would definitely be my fear. I don't think anybody wants this. I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I certainly don't want to see this land developed, and I know the family has expressed that same desire.
Just to kind of speak to the aspect of it potentially being voted down, I mean, our hope really is that in looking at the proposed budget, there's a zero net impact to the taxpayers. Even the initial stewardship is coming from Walkup Robinson Trust, which is, you know, money that was long ago set aside for the town and thankfully has grown over time to provide additional support for these types of acquisitions. So there's no, you know, while there's a temporary borrow of free cash, there's no permanent borrow of free cash. And so there will be no tax impact with this acquisition.
Any idea when the grant may be informed of their vote? Any idea?
It would be hopefully over the summer months that we would know.
I saw you in the back.
Janet Anderson, and just because I know somebody's going to ask this in town meeting anyway, what happens if the grant doesn't get approved?
Then
We'll be back at a future town meeting asking for funding, probably. Yeah. Or we'll apply for another grant.
Nothing happens if the grant doesn't come through, right? The free cash.
Well, nothing happens. I don't want to speak for the landowner. You know, the landowner has, you know, been very patient with us so far. So
I just say, as the landowner, my father, Bill Ellis, always wanted to keep open land, and I feel the same way. So nothing will happen, at least while I'm still here.
I guess the way I don't want to speak for you, but the way I heard the question is, if the grant doesn't come through, it doesn't jeopardize the free cash that was approved.
no,
Free cash will not be spent if the
the
grant.
article is written that we will not spend the money from free cash unless we receive the grant. So if we don't get this grant, we'll we'll have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. I'm very optimistic on this based on our conversations with the state so far. So.
And I appreciate the commitment to the open space legacy. It's wonderful.
I saw another hand up. Did you?
You kind of touched on what we had just discussed about the timing of the free cash and grant and who pays when, but pretty much addressed in those last few.
Really just because the grant is structured as a reimbursement, so the town actually has to spend the money and then get it back.
And then it was contingent on receiving the grant.
Yes.
It is, yeah. And I brought a draft copy. It's closing obviously across the street or over at Great Hall tonight, but I brought a draft copy of the language if anybody wants to kind of take a look at that. But basically it says, paraphrasing, not with the legalese that's in there, but basically it says if we don't receive, if the grant is not awarded to us and or the funds from Sudbury Valley trustees and Walker Robinson are not committed, then the funds will not be expended. And the reason we kind of structured it like this, I know it's a little bit confusing with when we have the free cash total separate from the Walk-Up Robinson money, is both of those pools of money, Walk-Up Robinson and free cash, are through the town of Westborough. And in order to maximize how much we get reimbursed for the grant, because it's a 50% reimbursement, we had to show that all of the money was coming from the town. So Sudbury Valley trustees will, issue the money to the town versus issuing it to the property owner directly. So that maximizes how much we can get reimbursed.
This is Ken Kelly. This is not a question, it's kind of a comment. I'm a new homeowner in town and just moved here about a year ago.
Welcome.
And this is exactly what I was hoping to discover would be happening. I've been having a lot of fun poking around on the charm bracelet trails and so on. And the collaboration that I see here with landowners and other entities, Concom and so on, you guys are great.
We appreciate that. As someone who's only worked here for a little over a year, I think it's fantastic as well. Westborough has this tremendous legacy that's been created over the last few decades with the trail system and the land protection that's in place, and I think it's really amazing. And something that many other towns are envious of.
There's more work to be done. More questions? All right, well, I think that'll do it. If anybody does have questions, though, you can reach out to me or Jen or any of us, really. I'd be happy to answer those at any point down the road. But hopefully we'll see you all on the 23rd. Candidates night is Sunday night, if anybody, just a reminder. What else?
And you're a candidate, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm running again. But that's not why I mentioned it. All right, anyway, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go over to the select board meeting and see if they got as many people there as we got. Really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.
If anybody who came in late didn't have a chance to sign in, there is a sign-in sheet at